I want to make sure I get a chance to get your personal reflections, which I know I always ask you when you're here. But first, just pick up on what Helene is talking about and what Ali has covered, that a year ago, the assessments of Russia that were shared as part of a strategy to deter the invasion itself have held up. But the estimations of Zelensky and the Ukrainian military seem to have maybe underestimated his resolve, the skill of the military, and the fortitude of the Ukrainian people. Is that a fair assessment?
I think Helene was absolutely right. I mean, they certainly did outperform a lot of expectations. I mean, we didn't know a year ago exactly how things were going to unfold. We certainly had a good sense of what Mr. Putin was planning to do, which is why we declassified a lot of information ahead of time to sort of throw him off his game. But we knew that he had upwards of 180,000 troops, all different types, artillery, infantry, air defense, everything, all aimed at moving into Ukraine, and we shared as much of that information with them as we could, but we did not have a perfect sense of how the Ukrainians were going to defend themselves in those early hours and days, and they certainly did surprise everybody with just how well they did. And I don't just mean bravery and courage on the battlefield. I mean, I think that's beyond question. I'm talking skill. I mean, their organizational elements and how they were able to perform on the battlefield. I think also maybe we didn't fully appreciate ourselves how valuable the training that we had done with the Ukrainians since 2014 had really been. We basically, not just the United States, but our allies, helped transform them from a Soviet-style army to a more Western-style army with, greater decentralization, a non-commissioned officers corps, the ability to be agile and nimble in the moment and make command decisions on the spot, something that the Russian army still can't do. And I don't know that we fully appreciated. I mean, I know we were very proud of our training and all we did, but I don't think we fully appreciated how much it took and how much it really did transform their military.
John, let me ask you about the other side. I mean, again, without any access to classified intelligence, seeing the empty, abandoned Russian tanks lining up on the way to Kyiv made me think that the Russian military was not all that maybe we thought they were. What was the aha moment for the leaders at the Pentagon?
I think we really, I'd have to go back and look exactly, but it was somewhere in the first week or so, week to 10 days, when we, as we were watching the operational reports coming out of Ukraine, particularly as they tried to move on Kyiv. And I think it was in that time frame where we began to see that there were real cracks in their performance capabilities. They were running out of fuel because they hadn't factored in fueling all these armored vehicles and infantry vehicles. They were running out of ammunition because they hadn't factored that in. Their command and control was really faulty. And by that, I mean their ability to direct different units in the moment and in the field. And the other thing that we learned very quickly on was how poorly they were at integrating air and ground. And so you had Russian aircraft and Air Force commanders making decisions completely independent of what their army commanders were trying to do on the ground. There was no synergy there. And I would tell you this, Nicole, that now here we are a year later, and they still are suffering those same problems. They still haven't solved logistics and sustainment. Their command and control is still not where it needs to be, or where you would expect it to be after a year of war. Unit cohesion, morale, leadership. I mean, I've said it before, but Mr. Putin's changing generals as often as I change my socks. I mean, he just can't find the right leadership to run this war. So they have not come out on the other side after a year of war and really improved. On the other hand, look at what the Ukrainians have done in a year. They have already taken back more than 50% of the territory that the Russians first captured in those first, couple of weeks or months of the war. More than 50% of that is back in Ukrainian hands.
Ali Velshi.
Yeah, I wanted to point out, you can't see it from here, but the Dnieper River is right over there. Not very far from here is where the Russian tanks made it to. They were at the gates of Kyiv. They were actually in parts of Kyiv. They occupied Irpin, Bucha, Hostomel, and remember this, they were out by April 1st. They were gone. They left a humanitarian massacre behind them, which was a very sad day for Ukraine and the world. And when Zelensky was asked about it today, when somebody said, what was the saddest day of the war for you? He said, the day we liberated Bucha. But that said, that's how close the Russians were. Yeah. They almost took the capital of an independent country. and they were fought off. And by the way, that was within the first 2 months of this war. The first month of the war, really, 5 weeks of the war, they were able to do that. So somewhere in that first 5 weeks is when everybody in the world realized this is not what we thought it was going to be.
And then, John, I'm going to ask you to, share what you can share now that maybe you couldn't share at the time. How did we adjust? I mean, how did that change the calculations on what we were willing to give? I mean, the delta seems to have shrunk. I know it's not totally aligned, but I used to ask Helene, what are they asking for that we're not giving them, and what does that system do? Again, it's not perfectly aligned, but it does seem to have shrunk. Can you just take us through that evolution of what they asked for and what we were willing to give once they had some success on the battlefield?
We really tried to evolve the support we give Ukraine with the war as it has evolved and changed over time. So in those first few days and weeks, it was all about Stingers and Javelins, right? The Stingers to knock out Russian helicopters that were advancing on Kyiv or trying to advance on Kyiv and those airports, the Antonov airport, but also the Javelin anti-tank missiles, because they were really moving in a mechanized set of columns towards Kyiv down from the south out of Belarus. And the Ukrainians really wanted those anti-tank missiles, and they were quite effective with it, knocking out columns by knocking out the lead vehicles and then maybe knocking out one or two in the middle of the column. And then as, to Ali's point, as Mr. Putin realized he was not going to get Kyiv and he was not going to get Kharkiv, so he withdrew all his troops back into the north, into Belarus, and refocused all his efforts in the east. Well, then it became an issue of long-range fires, what we call long-range fires. This is artillery, the ability of having the Ukrainians strike Russian lines well deep inside and give them some standoff distance. And so that's when we started sending howitzers and now the HIMARS. Then in the fall, when Mr. Putin decided he was going to start hitting civilian infrastructure with cruise missiles and Iranian drones, air defense. Not that it wasn't always an issue. Stingers are air defense capabilities, but more modern, more long-range air defense capabilities became important, and so we started flowing them. And now what we're trying to do in these critical months, and Helene talked about the importance of the next couple of months, and she's right. In these critical months, we're trying to get ahead of what we think the fighting is going to look like in the spring. We know that the Russians are preparing for offensive operations. The Ukrainians are obviously preparing not only to defend themselves against those operations, but to conduct offensive operations of their own. That's why we're taking battalions of them out of the country right now and training them on what we call combined arms maneuver. This is the ability to fight in open terrain in an integrated way, using artillery, infantry, armor, all together, including air defense. And we're giving them that training now, at the same time flowing into Ukraine the kinds of weapons and platforms they need to do that, whether it's Bradley fighting vehicles or eventually tanks and, the Leopard tanks that the Germans are going to provide. Even today's announcement, Nicole, has air defense capability in it, and sensors to allow them to defend themselves and their units in that open terrain. So we're trying to get ahead of what we think the fighting might look like in the spring.